since we were just talking a little bit about the Ted Cruz debacle with Tucker Carlson, let's play another clip. We played yesterday the very famous, widely circulated clip of Tucker Carlson asking Ted Cruz if he knew the size of Iran's population, and he had no idea, despite calling for regime change there. And we got to use like the little glee that Tucker Carlson gets that is usually so gross.
Like sort of prep school bully geeking out sort of energy.
Right. We got to use that for like good for just a split second in that interview, because he knew he got Ted Cruz there. And honestly, it didn't let up for the entirety of the interview. This was another part of the interaction. Tucker is basically asking Ted Cruz about his rabid Christian Zionism. This was that exchange.
Okay. And the reason is twofold. Number one, as a Christian, growing up in Sunday school, I was taught from the Bible, those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed.
Bro.
And from my perspective, I want to be on the blessing side of things.
Of those who bless the government of Israel?
Those who bless Israel is what it says. It doesn't say the government of, it says the nation of Israel. So that's in the Bible. As a Christian, I believe that.
Where is that?
I can find it to you. I don't have the scripture off the tip of my. You pull out the phone and use the.
It's in Genesis, but so you're quoting a Bible phrase. You don't have context for it. And you don't know where in the Bible it is, but that's like your theology. I'm confused. What does that even mean?
Tucker.
I'm a Christian. I want to know what you're talking about.
Hey, where does my support for Israel come from? Number one, because biblically we're commanded to support Israel. But number two,
hold on.
Hold
on. You're a senator, and now you're throwing out theology, and I am a Christian, and I am allowed to weigh in on this. We are commanded as Christians to support the government of Israel?
We are commanded to support Israel. And what
does that mean, Israel?
We're told those who bless Israel will be blessed.
But what? Hold on. Define Israel. This is important. Are you kidding? This is a majority Christian country.
Define Israel? Do you not know what Israel is? That would be the country you've asked like 49 questions about.
So that's what Genesis, that's what God is talking about.
The nation of Israel, yes.
So is that the current borders, the current leadership? He's talking about the political entity called Israel?
He's talking about the nation of Israel. Yeah, nations exist, and he's discussing a nation. A nation was the people of Israel.
Is the nation
They're the descendants
God's
of
referring
Abraham.
to in Genesis, is that the same as the country run by Benjamin Netanyahu right now?
Yes.
It is. Okay.
And by the way, it's not run by Benjamin Netanyahu as a dictator. It's a democratic country that elected.
He's the prime minister.
Right.
What?
But just like, America is the country run by Donald Trump. No, actually, the American people elected Donald Trump. The same principle
This is
there.
silly. I'm talking about the political entity of modern Israel.
Yes, and that is
You believe
Israel.
That's what God was talking about in
Yes.
Genesis.
I do, but
that country's existed since when?
For thousands of years. Now, there was a time when it didn't exist, and then it was recreated just over 70 years ago.
I'm saying...
Can you pause it? That's actually so interesting.
No, I'm not.
That's so interesting that he says that there was a time that it didn't exist and it was recreated. When was that time in between Genesis and, 1940, 1948, 1947? When was that time? That was the time when it was Palestine. That was the time when the Palestinians and the indigenous population of Palestine lived there.
Who, as people have pointed out, like a lot of those people descended from the folks who were Jews back in the time that they're talking about, like thousands of years ago. They just stayed there and changed religions.
Right. And there were also Jews there that were a part of indigenous Palestine. They were just a bit of a minority. Yeah.
Just also, what Ted Cruz is referencing there is a very recent interpretation of that part of the Bible that has become popularized, or that became popularized just in the past like 60, 70 years in the United States as part of like the Christian evangelical televangelist revolution of like the 50s and 60s. That's the interpretation that was mainstreamed by like just Jerry Falwell's out there, the like Oral Roberts who were becoming popular, the Pat Robertson was becoming popular. And there's very real criticism from like theologians who believe, as people believed before, that the Israel of the Bible that Tucker Carlson's referring to, which I think is the trap he was trying to lead Ted Cruz into, refers to like the followers of Christ now. It doesn't refer specifically in the Bible to any geographical part of land. It refers to people who like follow like the teachings of Jesus Christ. And so like this particular interpretation has been mainstreamed in America, but it is not, specifically biblically rooted. And I do find this schism that is, arising on the right very interesting, because it is like, I just think that it's so funny that Ted Cruz doesn't even have an answer to these obvious follow-up questions, not to mention the even more important follow-up question, which is that we live in a country that has in its constitution, enshrined in its constitution, the belief that there shall be no established religion in the country. So I would imagine that we would be against supporting any country that is an ethno-nationalist state, an explicit ethno-nationalist state. So it doesn't really matter if they're a Jewish one or a Christian one or anything like that. That's not the mechanism or the metric by which we should be like establishing support. It should be the opposite.
It's just evangelical, like modern theology, basically, that says that the return of Jews to Israel is important, because that's when you're able to get the clock going on Armageddon. There's a good write-up about this in The Guardian, but like that Jesus Christ returns, though, at that point, that's what's supposed to trigger it in their warped belief system. And that when that happens, a majority of Jews are going to die. So that's like, as they talk about how important it is to protect Israel and how we need to clamp down on speech that's critical of our support for genocide, their entire end game is to have a majority of Jews in Israel to die, because that's what, if they're not believers, that's what's got to happen to them,
Yeah, it's mostly associated with modern Left Behind eschatology, the movie series that has been made into a series of the book series that has been made into a series of Christian movies, sometimes starring Kevin Sorbo, about how people are going to be raptured. But that's not in the Bible. That's just part of the modern interpretation of Christianity that is so much more informed by popular culture. It's like the D&D Christianity that most American. Yeah,
abortion
exactly.
is also not there's talk about killing babies in their infancy, I think, in the Bible, if your wife has been unfaithful or things like that. But they don't talk about abortion in the Bible at all, nor do they talk about the modern state of Israel. It's just how American evangelicism, evangelical kind of communities have interpreted these things, because it's a Christo-nationalist vision, not one that's based in the text of the Bible.
Right. I mean, there's explicitly things in the Bible that are outright mentioned and banned, and saying you cannot do this. But because, modern day Christians love their shellfish or something, they conveniently avoid blends. That stuff.
Aren't you supposed to not be able to wear a shirt that's the blend of two different fabrics? They abandoned that part.
Yeah. Apartheid in fabrics.
Yeah.
And we also need to discuss that this is all. This entire conversation is in the context of attacking Iran, and the reason we are led to believe as Americans by our government that Iran is bad, obviously because they want weapons or whatever. But on top of all that, the reason that Iran having these weapons would be bad is because they are a scary theocracy. We can't have a country ruled by just one religion and abiding by that religion in their founding, country documents or whatever, having these weapons. And here's Ted Cruz saying that the whole reason he stands behind Israel in this war against Iran is because of his religion and his religious beliefs. And God told him.
So it's not scary to be a complete religious fundamentalist psycho, because they're white.
And this is also just, about the essential qualities that are assigned to the global north and Western civilization, and the ones that we assign to, the Middle East specifically, but also the global south. That's just a land of barbarians, and everything they do there is going to be interpreted through that lens. And so when we do things here, same thing as George W. Bush did when he was trying to invade Iraq, or when he did invade Iraq, he was talking about Gog and Magog and all that other fantasy crap. And people didn't take that as being, oh wow, look at this sign of this religious theocracy that is going to invade one of the other countries in the world because of some sort of backwards belief in religion. They still ascribe to it material realities that were driving us, but they don't include the parts where we were also indexing fantasy. because that's just not part of the things that we want to associate with like Western civilization. It's all very, I think, coming into stark relief as we see more and more people just say things like this on air.
I want to take a little trip down memory lane. What this Tucker and Ted Cruz interview reminded me of back when Christopher Hitchens was young and before the Iraq War, when he was saying like Mearsheimer's Israel lobby book wasn't anti-Semitic but kind of smelled like anti-Semitism. Not my favorite take of his. He was saying he did do some really great appearances, and this is him arguing with Charlton Heston, who isn't a senator from Texas, who was an actor. But here they are arguing about this, and Hitchens really kind of lays it into him here.
The test ban treaty. It has addressed itself to no other party in the Middle East that's acquiring nuclear weapons or has acquired them. These include Israel and Saudi Arabia, except Iraq. And it has decided to say to the Arabs that it will decide which of their countries can develop which weapons. I can tell you now, but you will find out later, the Arab world will not be spoken to in that tone of voice. They will not allow the United States to determine for them their defense policies. If you're for denuclearization, there's always been the option of an international conference on the Middle East and its regional and political problems, and that is the option that President Bush steadfastly refused from August 2nd till Desert Storm began and refuses now. This is a course of absolute folly. Let me ask a question to Mr. Heston. Can he tell me clockwise what countries have frontiers and borders with Iraq, starting from Kuwait?
Yes, indeed I can. Those borders are going to be very flexible, I think, and Iran and Iraq demonstrate that.
But you can't, can you?
Let me come to.
It wouldn't take a minute.
Let me come to your comment. Kuwait, Bahrain, Turkey, Russia, Iran.
Exactly. You don't know where it is, in other words, do you? You have no idea where the country is on the map, and you're in favor of bombing it now rather than later on the whim of a president.
Well, Mr. Hitchens, if I can interject, I'm not sure that the instantaneous command of the geography of the region.
Oh, I don't know. I think if you're in favor of bombing a country, you might pay it the compliment of knowing where it is.
Do you think that Tucker watched that before that exchange?
He's definitely aware of it.
I mean, well, he was doing his whole William F. Buckley impression the entire time. And Buckley is his son's name. And he was almost, I saw someone pointing out that Tucker was slipping into like a mid-Atlantic accent throughout it, which is what it could have been Hitchens or it could have been Buckley.
Going from O'Reilly to Buckley, yeah.
Right. Do we have any more of that clip? I feel like we pause it right at the end.
We can play a little bit more.
Maybe let's play a little more. It is just fun to watch Ted Cruz squirm here. Yeah. Because I paused it. I think we might have a second more. There we go. Okay.
Run by Benjamin Netanyahu right now?
Yes,
it is. Okay.
And by the way, it's not run by Benjamin Netanyahu as a dictator. It's a democratic country that elected.
He's the prime minister.
Right.
What?
But just like America is the country run by Donald Trump. No, actually, the American people elected Donald Trump. The same principle
this is
there.
silly. I'm talking about the political entity of modern Israel.
Yes, and that is.
You believe
Israel.
that's what God was talking about in Genesis?
I do, but
that country's existed since when?
For thousands of years. Now, there was a time when it didn't exist and then was recreated just over 70 years ago.
I'm saying, I think most people understand that line in Genesis to refer to the Jewish people, God's chosen people.
That's not what it says.
Okay, Israel, but you don't even know where in the Bible it is. So I don't know.
I don't remember the scriptural citation. But
let's go to war.
Okay, it's like Genesis 16 or something like that. But yes, it's in the early. The point is,
all right, Tucker, you keep interrupting me before I finish my sentence.
It's important to know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're saying. As a Christian, if I believe in Jesus, I have to support the modern state of Israel.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm explaining for me what my motivation is.
But okay, so I'm just trying to understand. You said God tells you to support the modern state of Israel in the Bible, in some place in the Bible that you heard about, but you don't know where it is. That's your theology?
You're going back, am I a sleazy feline again? I mean,
if you accuse me of anti-Semitism again, I will say that, but I don't think you will.
Wow.
I mean, it's very, I don't say easy to be impressed by Tucker Carlson here, but these are just basic follow-up questions to what Ted Cruz has been saying. And we have politicians across our entire political spectrum who will repeat the exact same things that Ted Cruz has said and will say it the exact same way. And it's so interesting that they get follow-up questions so infrequently that Ted Cruz is just not even prepared to answer them. And I don't think there would be a lot of politicians who sound just like Ted Cruz on Israel and your support for Iran who would be able to answer any better. But this is evidence of that they're not being pressed on this issue. They're
Honestly,
not being pressed
Ted,
on it from the biblical side or from the civil rights side.
Right.
Ted's an example of one I would have expected to have performed a little bit better on these questions.
I mean, he was, for Ted Cruz is well known as one of the most loathsome people in Washington, even hated by John Boehner back in the day, who called him the devil. But he did have like a history of being a little bit a debate nerd at his Ivy League, with his Ivy League education, that he tried to get people to forget about. Remember when he did that ad with the Duck Dynasty guys and smeared all that stuff?
I started growing a beard,
face.
and frankly, that was an improvement over.
It was an improvement. It hid the chin a little bit better, or the lack of chin.
Like looking like McCarthy.
This is the feline part that he was referring to. We'll play a bit of this here.
It's interesting you're trying to derail my questions by calling me an anti-Semite, which you are.
I did not.
Of course you are. And rather than be honorable enough to say it right to my face, you are in a sleazy feline way implying it, or just asking questions about the Jews. I'm not asking questions about the Jews. There's nothing to do with Jews or Judaism. It has to do with foreign government.
Isn't Israel controlled?
He almost said, "I have friends that are Jewish." He almost
he
did
does
it.
say it. No, he does say it. He does say it at some point. Yeah.
He says it later. Okay. Well.
Yeah.
The thing is that unfortunately Tucker is actually anti-Semitic. Like this is this this is this Buchananite Marjorie Taylor Greene Jewish space laser thing where they're just mad about like the only time Tucker has highlighted Palestinians' plight is to talk about the Christian Palestinians who are a minority there, but those are the only things he cares about because he's
a white supremacist.
Right?
Yeah. And that includes, not being happy about doing a whole bunch of extra work for the Jews if they're getting in the way of, say, your white genocide in South Africa thing, which is something he told Trump about in 2018 through his TV show.
He's a great replacement theory guy, which is an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. Yeah.
Not only that, but he's also a businessman. And I think a lot of media figures on the right are seeing this schism arise, not just on the right, but across the entire political spectrum when it comes to people who are more well integrated into the economy, well integrated into political machines, being pro-Israel, being suicidally pro-Israel as the cost of living increases in America, as people are seeing their opportunities shrink. And Tucker Carlson sees, just like Candace Owens, this is going to be my opportunity to ride this wave of newly renewed anti-Semitism on back of anti-Israel sentiment to the top, because a lot of liberal outlets will have Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens on the debate, like whether or not Israel is something to be supported, but they won't have a leftist on, so they can expect a certain level of platforming from the center and from like the center left when it comes to their ideas, because that will be a way to frame like anti-Israel sentiment as anti-Semitic for people who are liberals, but for the vast majority of Americans, they're just going to be hearing that like, oh, these are the only people who are criticizing Israel. These are the only people who are allowed to criticize Israel. Why is that? How is that? And then they're going to be going to Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson to hear this sort of thing. And this is how they're going to take a bite out of not crime, but Ben Shapiro's market share.
Yeah,
Ted Pool's market share.
That's 100% accurate, but also for a lot of them who aren't like involved in the media business or whatever, there's not a financial ploy here either. It's pure ideology. This is their chance to win some new converts over to their white supremacist ideology.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And this is a fantastic way for them to do it. I mean, especially when you have issues that, go beyond the usual political discourse bubbles that we have, where people, like you were mentioning, Brandon, people are going to feel the pain of cost of living, the cost of living crisis, and all these other things. And while they're dealing with this, they're going to see the U.S. put all this money into a war spearheaded by Israel. And people are going to be upset about this, and they're going to have no political foundation or background to understand the sides here and understand exactly who believes what and who is for what. And they're going to come across people like the anti-Semitic right, and they're going to see them criticize Israel, not understanding why they criticize Israel, and they're going to go in that direction.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's only so much gaslighting that people can take, and they're thirsty for voices that are acknowledging what they're seeing in front of their eyes. And liberalism's failure and the Democratic Party's failure is that they have ceded any ground on this front. The fact that we have it's in ashes, the anti-war sentiment that catapulted Obama in part to winning the presidency, the anger at the Iraq War that had actual political salience has been entirely dissipated by, one, I think Obama's lack of trying to hold the Bush administration accountable for being war criminals and wanting to turn the page on that, and the financial collapse, but also accelerated by Joe Biden's Zionism. The Democrats have lost on this issue, and now the people that are making these arguments to powerful politicians' faces about Israel are literal anti-Semites.
The truth is, if we had known back when Citizens United was decided that one of the big things was not just going to be corporate cash, but the impact Israel money would have in our politics, basically buying it up.
Yep.
Like both of our, and not just like, changing people's positions, but basically directing our entire political organizations toward candidates who already, like Chuck Schumer, think it's their job to keep the left in this entire nation of 300 plus million Americans pro-Israel.
We've talked about the JCPOA and the Iran deal. Chuck Schumer voted against that. And he became the leader of the Democrats in the Senate after Obama was out of office. And
you can't support Israel and be pro-democracy and anti-war.
Well,
yeah.
No, I think that's a good point, because in reality, the opposite is true. Like, Israel is a very useful cipher for a lot of things within our political system, but for liberals, or at least Democrats, who need to pretend that there is a strain of anti-war sentiment in the establishment, even though we've seen everything to the contrary from them over the past 30, 40 years, Israel acts as a way for them to, signal that they have faith, that they have, that they are proponents of the American strategy in the Middle East. It's a way for them to advocate for American imperialism in the Middle East without triggering the, somewhat buried anti-war sentiments of their voting base. Because Israel is the Jewish state in the Middle East. So if you just say you're pro-Israel, even though we know what that comes wrapped with, it comes wrapped with the military-industrial complex, or it comes wrapped with the security state, it becomes wrapped with like the intelligence state, right? But a lot of liberals just see it as like supporting Israel. They don't understand that it's a very useful way for Democrats to show allegiance to that greater project of the United States and, our allies in Western Europe in the Middle East, without triggering the anti-war sentiments of their voting base.
Absolutely. Do we have more of this, or?
We do. I just want to flash this real quick. As Charlie Kirk tried to take a poll, should we get involved in Israel's war against Iran? 10% said yes, 89.7% no. And now he's trying to figure out this way of, like, he's retweeting Stephen Crowder saying, actually, Trump's always been against Iran getting a nuke, so he's actually being consistent, which is what Trump's himself saying. Go back there.
It's the other one. It's not this. It's the other clip, yeah.
You are in a sleazy, feline way implying it, or just asking questions about the Jews. I'm not asking questions about the Jews. There's nothing to do with Jews or Judaism. It has to do with the foreign government.
Isn't Israel controlling our foreign policy? That's not about the Jews.
You said, I'm asking.
And by the way, you're the one that just called me, I think, a sleazy feline. So let's be clear.
It's sleazy to imply that I'm an anti-Semite, which you just did.
No, I just said, why is that the only question you're asking? You answer it. Give me another reason. If you're not an anti...
Can I give an answer to that? Maybe because they're about to drag us into a fucking giant war?
Yeah.
Of the same pretext that they did in 2003? Saying, right. It's going to be good for everybody. Take care of this guy who's a bad neighbor for us. And we just did that.
Which, by the way, Tucker was, fine with midwifing.
Exactly. I mean, semi-literate monkeys, I think is what he called Iraqis. I wonder what he would, how he would characterize Iranians, but, maybe we don't need to get that far.
I mean, Israel just doesn't control our government's foreign policy. The military-industrial complex does.
Yeah.
Like the military-industrial complex controls our government's foreign policy. And,
they've won a war with Iran too.
And really, yeah, exactly. And they've won a war with Iran longer than anyone on the show has been alive.
Yeah.
And it just might not be the opportune time for that right now because Israel has become a rogue part of the American military industrial complex's project in the Middle East. But like overall, this is something that America wants to do, which is why Netanyahu started it, because he's tempting the American military complex into being like, well, you can keep withdrawing support from us slowly or speaking out against us or doing this Iran deal or whatever you think that you're doing. But we could also just have war with Iran. It's like you fight with it's like when you fight with your partner and you both leave to different parts of the house, and then when you come back into the room, they have like a whole dinner made or something. It's supposed to just like bridge that gap.
Yep.
He knows what people want. Like it might even bridge the gap between John Bolton and Donald Trump.
It bridges the whole bipartisan gap. I mean, like the opposition party in the House and Senate is led by two men who are on the take, who their campaigns are paid for by Israel, by supporters of Israel.
Yep.
And that's the people who are supposed to stand up to Donald Trump as he does a war for Israel. Some more if you want.
Yeah, a little bit more.
So you're asking.
You to imply that I'm an anti-Semite, which you just did.
No, I just said, why is that the only question you're asking? You answer it. Give me another reason. If you're not an anti-Semite, give me another reason why the obsession is Israel.
I am in no sense obsessed with Israel. We are on the brink of war with Iran, and so these are valid questions.
But you're not asking about Iran or the Ayatollah.
If I can finish, you asked me why I'm obsessed with Israel.
Yep.
3 minutes after telling me that when you first ran for Congress, you elucidated one of your main goals, which is to defend Israel.
Yes.
And I'm the one who's obsessed with Israel. I don't see a lawmaker's job as defending the interests of a foreign government, period. Okay. Any government, including the ones that my ancestors come from. So that's my position. That does not make me an anti-Semite. And shame on you for suggesting otherwise. And I mean that. And that's low. Yes. You know it's low. So why don't you just answer my questions
in a
straightforward, rational way? You certainly have the IQ to do it.
So shame on you is cute, by the way, Tucker.
It is. It's not cute. I'm offended.
I'm
obsessed with the Jews. You just told me.
You just called me a sleazy feline.
It is sleazy to imply.
What is that, anti-Semitic? To call Ted Cruz a sleazy feline? Like, what are we talking about? Sorry, he was rude to you, Ted.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
These
are not Chatham House rules.
He's calling him a little B with a little P, is what he calls him.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I think, Ted Cruz may be a good debater, but I think even that just enforces the point that these are not questions that you're asked on American news shows when you profess support for Israel. When you say that you're an evangelical Christian and God tells you to march in lockstep with the IDF, they just go, okay, good, me too. Next question. How much of our money can we send them? Is the next question they ask.
It's so funny though, like to go from, the Bible told me this, the magical book, 1,000 years old, said I need to support Israel. And by the way, why are you obsessed with Israel? Like,
right. Right. I love how it's so undeniable how absolutely rabid and psychotic the state of Israel is,
and everyone in America that supports it.
So it's just like now their final vestige is like, why do you care so much, bro?
There's so much going on.
Yeah.
It just is on its surface very weird the way our senators and Congress people and even just state representatives talk about Israel. And that's what Tucker Carlson is highlighting here. It's become so normalized in our media that's been put in a black box and no one comments on it. But they say stuff like that all the time. It's like, my first goal in government is to protect Israel. It's like, that just does not make any sense, even in the context of the MAGA's America First agenda. Obviously, we on the left know that that's just like, it's a stand-in for the American military industrial complex. It's a stand-in for Islamophobia. It's a stand-in for a lot of things. Certainly, I have a hard time believing it's actual affection for Jewish people or the state of Israel when it comes from the far right in this country. I think that's ridiculous. But yeah, like it's just not challenged at all.
Yep. All right, guys, I'm going to open up the phones now, I think. 646-257-3920. We'll read some IMs, take a call or two. Daniel from VA, his interview with Cruz was funny and frustrating. It's funny because two of my least favorite people fighting, and it's frustrating because Tucker is a talented rhetorician. How do you say that? Rhetorician. Whoa. And he's grilling a politician in a way that more purported journalists should, but won't. But he's also an anti-Semite who believes in nothing. Yep. pretty much
But again,
summed it up.
this sort of thing, the fascists being able to pick low-hanging fruit, why is that low-hanging fruit still on the branch? It's because the entire Democratic Party wants to accept the people like Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, AOC, like lower down. Chuck Schumer don't want to pick that fruit.
Tony 32K, I've just been to see 28 years later, and I swear a character turned around and said that we're going to be safer in here than out there. The more I see happening on this side of the screen, the more I want to climb into the deepest horror. They seem like gentle rom-coms. The more I see what is going on everywhere all the time, not a word of a lie. Joe Burley, Psalm 15:5, those who lend money without charging interest and who cannot be bribed to lie about the innocent, such people will stand firm forever. Joe Burley also said, Proverbs 22:16, a person who gets ahead by oppressing the poor or showering gifts on the rich will end in poverty. Yes, thank you.
Yep, religious people, hypocrites.
Hypocrites, for sure. Machinist Dave, the U.S. stole so much native Holy Land and shrug it off as arbitrary while simultaneously opening about how important it is for Jerusalem to be a part of Israel, as if the religious beliefs aside from Christianity are just mysticism, including Judaism. It's well said. I mean, it really is just like...
And Israel's just doing what we did to the natives. I mean, look at the Black Hills in South Dakota. That was one of their holy lands. And what do? We're like, okay, you can have it. And then we got our trains and rail and ability to get troops out there. And then we took it and then carved the faces of a bunch of plantation owners. I guess Lincoln was up there too. And Teddy Roosevelt, another white supremacist. But put that right on one of their mystical mountains.
It's manifest destiny. Our religious beliefs are actually really rational because they have capitalism behind it. And that means that anybody's other beliefs in like mysticism or spirituality are that of primitive monkeys because there's no money behind it.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.